Blessings. So in this video, I want to talk about an area of spiritual warfare that most people won't be aware of before it's too late, or they've come to Christ. There is an element in the world, in the earth, and that element is representative of chaos. Now, the reason that total chaos doesn't ensue, even though even a small amount of chaos will ultimately lead to total chaos by way of its exponentially destructive nature, it will manifest in this world to a certain degree as much as God allows it to. Because God is the most powerful person, and He Himself is order. He is true system, the true way. So there's an element in the world that is destructive. They are aliens. They don't behave normally. They don't comply with order. They only are restrained and restricted by their confines. They only adhere to confines, and it's not because they don't test the fence. Because the nature of chaos is to destroy order. That's its actual urge, desire, and fundamental drive, is to destroy order. So anywhere it identifies a weakness or a potential weakness, it's attacking that weakness. It's as simple as a goat kicking a fence. A beast testing the fence. That's what it is. And so God is that fence. So they will push and test and try wherever they can get away with it. Because they simply do not submit to order. They only submit to greater force. And it just so happens that the one who is order is the greater force. And that is the God of the Bible, Yahweh. Now, Yahweh sent His Son, His Creator. Not the creator of Yahweh. Yahweh had no beginning as such. He is the eternal God. But His Son, in the form of Jesus, in the form of a man, had a beginning in the flesh. So the Word of God, the creator of the universe, took on the form of a man to enter into the earth, to pay for our crimes, so that those who would destroy us didn't have lawful remit to do so. Remember, Satan came down with great wrath, seeking whom he may devour. He has only come to steal, kill, and destroy, and all he will do is try and implement those three directives. Now, we could get into a lengthy conversation about how he goes about doing that, but it's simple. It's like the decomposition of a body. That's what he does. He causes division, corruption, and decay. Just like the decomposition of a corpse, of a dead body, of a cadaver. And that's all he's interested in implementing, are the systems through which decomposition can occur. And so when decomposition is occurring, there appears to be a system of governance. But the system of governance is only that drive of decomposition. So it has the appearance of order, but it is, by nature, destructive. So it's a system of destruction. Just like the decomposition of the body is a system of destruction. Because in order for anything to happen, there has to be a system. So God has ordered the darkness, even though He has nothing to do with it. Now, how does the darkness have any order? because it submits to the light where there is order. So light is greater than darkness. Therefore, darkness has to submit to light. Therefore, darkness is ordered by the light along the borderline. So when you turn on the light in a room, what happens? The light determines where the darkness borderline is. It's called shadow. So that point of interaction, as many artists will tell you, when they're depicting light and dark, where the darkness meets the light is the most contrasting position, which makes sense because the darkness has nothing to do with the light, and light is greater than the darkness. So that the darkness is submitting to the position of the light. That's why Jesus said, overcome evil with good. It's as simple as that. Evil cannot be where good is. It can't. If you're manifesting love and you're manifesting good, darkness cannot be there. But what darkness does is it arranges the situations and circumstances to create the opportunity for you to fail to do what is good. So did you ever hear the saying, give them an inch, they'll take a mile? This is done to try to reduce the cheerfulness with which you give. It's like if I said to you, if anybody wants a painting, just let me know. Then the next day somebody's asking for 2 paintings. Not only that, but they're not even waiting until the paintings are finished and are ordering paintings. Then they go on to tell you they don't really know anything about paintings. So it's saying, give me more than you've intended to, and I don't really appreciate it. So that's the devil. The devil sets himself up to try to undermine the will and spirit with which you're giving. But it's a very dangerous game for him. Because he can find himself very quickly fleeing, and often does, because he cannot be where the light is. So he gets a limited amount of time, and he has adequate power and resources to make these presentations. And what he's basically asking you to do is join him. He's asking you to die. He's trying to exhaust your goodwill. That's why they try. You see, most of what the darkness does is a projection. They don't actually have that power. They don't actually have the ability to do what they're implying. It's all a projection, and that's lies are required to make those projections. They're professions, but they're lies. Because the darkness doesn't have the power to exact what it claims to have the power to exact. So it operates on the basis of fear, while it's saying it operates on the basis of respect. Because they respect what they fear. They respect what is greater than themselves. They respect only to avoid harm coming upon themselves. That's fear. So they claim not to operate on the basis of fear, but that's what their respect is on the basis of. Their respect is on the basis of fear. Because fear is a spirit of death. So darkness is weak, pretending to be strong. Darkness is an invitation to death. Satan is the weakest power, not the strongest. He's the weakest and the least person in existence. He's the most pathetic, the most petty, the most chaotic, and the most worthless. The father of lies. No good there. And Jesus said they know not who they serve. Because God knows. Even though God has nothing to do with Satan, he knows what he is. Better than anyone else. So God knows that the devil is worthless. When he cast him out of heaven because there was no place found for him. There's no good in him. None. Only evil continually in him. Everything else, it's only affected so that he can keep on killing. It's only the necessary ordering of the hunt. And in so doing, in ordering his servants and his nation, he increases their harm because he creates a society of sin. So that society of sin increases the harm of the sinners who partake of it in eternity. Every engagement you could possibly have with Satan is exponentially increasing your eternal harm. There's no good there. There is no good in this world. Any appearance of good is only Satan's lure. It's the facade he puts up to usher you into hell. So what I really wanted to talk about in this video, and have done, I've just been preparing the ground, is how if you're not aware of the existence of Satan and fallen angels and demons and the evil kingdom, if you're not even aware of it, and spirituality itself, meaning that the spiritual things are greater than the physical things and that they're existing along with, then you have limited your strategic understanding, or the understanding of the strategies of your enemies who are hunting your soul, by way of not believing that they even exist. You see the point? And how does this manifest? Well, it manifests by way of the devil will try to lead you to death. How does he do that though? Well, he invites you to it. How does he do that? He presents something to your mind so that when it's said to you, you think that you are already standing in that position. Because the thought occurred to you prior to the invitation being made. So it's like they might come to you in your sleep and you might have a certain type of dream. And then that day, when you wake up, that thing is presented to you, or the day after, or the day after that, that thing is presented to you. so that you have been primed to take it. It's very evil. And the reason they do that is because they're exploiting the fact that you don't know that spiritual warfare is occurring on that level. They're exploiting your ignorance. Jesus said, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge." And the devil is exploiting your lack of knowledge. Because he's a detestable scum. And will look for any weakness to exploit. He hunts babies. He's a scum. So, when something occurs to your mind as a Christian, what does the Bible say to us about this? It says, because obviously you would say, well, how do I know what is my own thought and what is originated with me and what has been presented to me by demons and aliens, which demons are? Why, how am I going to know what's my own thought and what has been presented? The question is, why would it matter? If it is not a godly thought, if it is not righteous, if it is not good, then you cast it away. See, the Bible says, take captive any thought that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So that thought will be presented to you by a demon, and then you go, that's an evil thought. You'll be able to acknowledge it or identify it as an evil thought. So when that evil thought manifests itself, you take it captive. So then you don't have to worry about where the thought originated. Did it come from me, my own mind, my own heart? Or was it presented to me by a fourth dimensional cosmic entity trying to lead me to do that thing and to be more susceptible to doing it? Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the source, because we've identified ourselves as wretched men in need of a saviour. So whether it's coming from a demon or it originated with me, I shouldn't act upon it and I should take it captive. So it wouldn't matter if the devil and all his demons and all of hell were sitting in the same room as you, trying to fill your head with evil thoughts, because you would take them all captive and you wouldn't act upon any of them. And it wouldn't matter if they could read every one of your thoughts, because you'd be taking them captive and rejecting them as evil thoughts if they were. So the Bible says, take captive every thought that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God. So that's what we do. We take them captive. Don't act upon them at all. Because all they try to do, all they know to do, is try to kill. And that requires their lies. So their lies are integrated into every position they can access. So all you have to do to avoid them is take every thought captive that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So what they're trying to do is, every time that you will endeavour to do a charitable, benevolent, loving thing or desire to give freely to people, they will try to make that process as difficult as possible, Or they will just completely remove, through people they've controlled, witches and wizards, completely remove the facility to do so. Because they are fundamentally against the free giving one to another. Because that's good leaven in society. That increases everybody's wealth and prosperity and love. And they're fundamentally opposed to it. They're only death. There's no good in them. So when you endeavour to give, it's that mentality, take the risk and all. You give somebody your hand to give them up something freely, and they'll take the wrist and all, and the arm and everything else. You see? So when you give, you have to give in a manner that doesn't deplete you. So that you can't give any further. Because then the devil would just deplete everybody, so that they couldn't give any further. So how has he tried to do that? He has tried to do that by removing gainful employment from the conversation in the governments. Why? Well, the Bible says, work with your hands so that when you have so done, you can give to those in need. Work with your hands so that when you have done so, you can then give to your neighbour in need. Well, what does that imply? Work really hard so that you can lose everything you've got, because when you give to somebody, you'll have nothing left for yourself? Of course not. It means that when you have worked and paid all that you need to pay, you'll still have a little bit left over, and that little bit that you have left over, you can give to your neighbour in need. You see, the Bible tells us, give freely. Freely you have received, freely give. And so because the Bible has told us, freely you have received, freely give, the devil hates free giving. And he hates cheerful free giving. So anywhere he can put his stinky stench on something, he will. He's like a reverse sewer. So anywhere he can muddy something or filthy it up, he will. Anywhere he can try to taint something or cause a sort of a recoil on giving. I was going to give, he will try to do that. So this is why we just continue giving. Just give. Because when you set up your factory of giving, the devil can't be anywhere next, nigh, or nor near you, because it's a place of love. So when you're giving from a cheerful place of love, devil is far from it. He would try to stifle it. He would be in and around the place trying to look for an opportunity to interfere with it. But he can't be there. He just can't. He has nothing in the light. Nothing. So he's, as much as he possibly can, trying to interfere with the process of free giving in society. Now, charitable organisations do exist, and people will give gifts from one household to another. But increasingly in the world, mechanisms of division are being put in place through the failure of governments to provide gainful employment. And this is the strategic effort of Satan to remove gainful employment from the world, to make everybody less than a slave, to the corporations who are manufacturing most of what a household will take in. And I watched a little advertisement recently. It was like, it was set up to appear as though it was occurring sort of in the I'd say it was probably 50s, looked like 1950s, something like that, maybe a little earlier. Where, you know, electrical appliances were coming into fashion and they were trying to sort of sell them to the households and they were starting to advertise them. And somebody said, yeah, well like, you produce these things and we don't actually necessarily need them. You know, you don't need necessarily a fridge. You don't need necessarily a washing machine or a dryer. You don't necessarily need those things. They're conveniences. And so the point they were making was you don't need a dishwasher, you know, like, etc. But they were selling these things and the man said, well, you sell these to me today, I'm working for you tomorrow. And the point is because people were working to pay them off. And then you're working to fuel them. So the more of these unnecessary conveniences that you take into your house, the more of a financial incumbency is upon you to keep those who manufacture them afloat. And then all of these efforts that you're making are being sent to one entity, the owner of the company of the electrical appliances. So it's actually the siphoning of good leaven and financial benefit from the nation at large. Because when you buy a Bosch appliance, the money goes to Bosch. People used to say historically, yeah, well, there are factories, people are getting employment from all of that. No, guys, the amount of people employed by these companies is tiny compared to the amount of money that these companies are making. They're siphoning money from the nations for unnecessary appliances. And the more they can get you used to them and relying upon them in your day, because now you're working more hours to pay for these things, the more you're basically a slave of conveniences that you rarely use. I mean, how often would you use a washing machine? Once a week? 2 weeks? People have wardrobes full of clothes they don't wear. Child could have a wardrobe full of clothes, but he's always wearing his favourite trousers. We don't need as much as they're telling us we need. If you have cotton trousers, you can't wash them anyway in the washing machine. So why don't you wash things by hand? Your socks and your boxers and your shirt. Why wouldn't you do it by hand? It did it years ago. So the point I'm making is you don't actually need these things. They're conveniences. Years ago, to keep things cool, they would just put them under the ground. And it was enough. Now it's all about shelf life. The longer something's on a shelf, the less nutritional value it has. The longer you fail to eat something, or you have to pasteurize it, which basically is cook it, so that it doesn't go off, the less nutritional value it has anyway. So these are all systems of death and division that they're trying to enslave us to. Are you getting the point? They sell these things to us as conveniences, and what they rob from us is huge compared to what we actually benefit. And then they have to basically tailor-make things to suit the appliances they give us. So it was never really about the appliances. It was always about control. So Satan is trying to increase the things that one perceives they rely upon. And then eventually, when everything's set up to receive those things, it becomes increasingly more difficult to resist them. For example, if you live in a house, a modern house, and it's set up to take oil heating, reconfiguring that house to take stove would be a relatively difficult and costly process. And they know that. So they increasingly fail to make things more easily provided for by unnecessarily complicating them. And it's all designed to keep you out of the house more often and away from your family members, because then the fourth dimensional cosmic entities, the demons, can isolate people in their thoughts and cause division between them, the less they're in each other's company. Do you see the point? So they're constantly working behind the scenes to cause division, because division is decomposition. So all of their systems, whether on purpose or accidentally, are death, because that's all they know how to create. And so it actually expedites or speeds up, it quickens the process of decomposition. Just like when a body begins to decompose, it accelerates as it's decomposing. And so death has to accelerate to reduce the body. That's why it's all about depopulation and decomposition, division. That's why they want this new world order, because actually the new world order is the quickening of the decomposition of the body, which is the family unit, which is the fundamental cell unit of society. So they're trying to decompose on a cellular level. In fact, in some languages, I think the house is called a cell. When you go to prison, you're in a cell. Your home, your house, the family unit, its abode is the cell. It's the fundamental unit of society. Just like the cell is the fundamental building block of the body, the physical body. So they know this, and our ancestors knew this, and they enshrined in the Irish Constitution that gainful employment was necessary for the common good. So the failure of the government now to talk about gainful employment shows that they're working on behalf of Satan and of systems of death and decomposition and actual destruction of society instead of the building up of society. And all of these false flag operations, like being concerned about the cost of living crisis and all this, there's no cost of living crisis. There's a failure to provide gainful employment crisis. See, they misplace the focus so that they can't be blamed for their failure to do what it is incumbent upon them to do what it is their duty to do. They point over there. Oh, look over there. Don't look at me. Look at the cost of living crisis. Oh, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine is the problem. It's the cause of this failing system. No, it's not. It's their failure. They occupy the seat. You see, I built a little garden throne here. I'm just going to use it as an example. See, over there. See this seat, right? Imagine that's a king's throne. And I'm going to sit down now. Now imagine me as king. Okay, I'm the king. I'm the king of the castle. Now. And you'd say to me, right, king, you have these certain powers. Okay, I have these certain powers, right? But what goes with those powers? What is the responsibility with those powers? The responsibility with those powers is for me as king to ensure that each household has enough. Now, we're not just talking about living wage. What's that? This conversation that the government keeps having about living wage, what is that? Living wage is not in our constitution. What's the constitution? It's the written law that determines how the government should uphold our rights and implement them. Oh, and so your rights are in there and the systems through which those rights should be upheld. Yeah, pretty much. Okay, right, well, that means that whoever is in government or whoever's king has to implement those rights by following the Constitution. Yeah, pretty simple. Okay, so living wage isn't in the Constitution? No, it's not. No, it isn't. I'm just talking to my counsel here. No, it isn't. As king, because a king has counsellors. No, it's not in the Constitution. Okay, my king, well, why are they having conversations about things that are not in our Constitution, that you haven't written into the law, my king? Well, they're just making it up as they go along, it appears. Well, why? Because they don't want to submit to what is the written law. That's treason. Yeah, that's treason. That's treason. Treason. Yes, it is, my gallery. It is treason. Indeed, counsel. Because it is absolutely their duty as the officials that we have assigned to ensure that they implement what is in our written law. Yes, sire. Yes, sire. It is. Okay, so these officials are failing to implement the written law. Yes, not only, sire, are they failing to implement it, but they're failing to even talk about it. They're failing to talk about it? Yes, sire, they're failing to talk about it. Well, whose officials are they then? They're not working for us if they're not even having the conversation about gainful employment, which is enshrined in our law. Yes, sir, they're not even having the conversation about what is enshrined in our laws, like gainful employment. They're talking about living wage and minimum wage, and these things aren't even in our laws. Well, why are they making up terms, counsel? Well, sir, they're making up terms because they clearly don't want to have the conversation about what is enshrined in our law. Well, counsel, this is a very, very serious treason. This is the highest of treasons. They're not even talking about our written law. They're not our officials then. They can't be our officials, our government, if they're not even talking about our laws. Yes, sire, that is the case. They have committed treason, and the highest of treasons. They're not even talking about gainful employment. And the only reason, counsel, they would fail to talk about gainful employment is because they don't want to educate the peoples as to what their rights are. Correct, sire. This is, in fact, why they would do that. Well, they have committed treason. And in years gone by, the penalty for treason would be death, beheading. What is it today, Council? Well, it varies, but it's up to a lifetime in prison, sire, for high treason. Well, this is in fact what the government are committing if they're not having even having the conversation about gainful employment, which is the fundamental right of the Irish person. Yes. Who are you, King? I am the voice of the people, because it is the people who give the government and the officials their authority, power and money. So if they're not doing what it is the people have exacted and charged them to do, they're committing treason. Yes, that is in fact the case, because every Irishman is sort of like a king who is overseeing the government, ensuring that the government are doing what they should be doing according to the written law, which is the Constitution. So every Irishman is a sort of a king in that sense. Yes, that is correct, sire. That is correct. So why are the government then, Council, why are they failing to implement the laws of Ireland? It appears, sire, that they are usurpers and that our state is under occupation of dictators who are witches and wizards of Freemasonry, who pretend to be a charitable organisation to keep themselves concealed. Clever little wolves, huh? Well, those witches and wizards, well, they're going to be exposed big time, because gainful employment is the fundamental right of the Irish person, and they're not even having that conversation, which shows that they're intending to keep the people in ignorance as to what they should expect in terms of wages. So what they've cleverly done is take the focus off themselves by claiming there's some kind of cost of living crisis rather than the failure to provide adequate wages. Yes, that is in fact what they're doing, sire. Clever, isn't it? So they just keep pointing to something else as being the cause for what they're failing to do. Yeah, pretty much. They're playing the blame game. They're placing the blame on things which are impersonal. Cost of living, impersonal. It appears that it's impersonal, but actually, sire, cost of living is determined by men. So what they try to do, sire, is they try to claim that cost of living is merely determined by circumstance. And then they claim those circumstances are out of their control. Yes, that is in fact what they're doing, Council. It is, I can identify that now. Well, they have in fact committed high treason. That is my ruling. That the current government, Michael D. Higgins, the President, and all of his gallery are committing high treason, yes, and not merely for failure to mention gainful employment, but for legislating that they don't have to ensure that things are constitutional before they enact them into the legislature. By using terms such as presumptively constitutional whenever they want. Presumptively constitutional, well, this is a moron of a statement. It's a headless chicken. It doesn't. You wouldn't know what way it's going to go next. Well, presumptively constitutional implies that we must presume that it's lawful, even though they haven't bothered to check. Well, why would anybody fail to bother to check whether something's constitutional or not, Council? Well, the only way I can see, my king, is that they don't want others to know. That they know it's not constitutional and they don't want others to know. So they tell others to presume it's constitutional and they appear to fail to check it so that there's no certainty in the situation, which would give them the appearance of acting with impunity, in ignorance. Because if it was perceived by others that they knew that it wasn't constitutional, then it would most certainly be considered treason, unequivocally and unambiguously, because there would be no possible area of doubt or shadow of doubt, because they would have willingly tested something and then failed to implement it. Whereas they're claiming in the lack of the testing that they have some level of impunity, or that they can't be blamed because they didn't do the test. Well, hold on, counsel. It's their responsibility to do the test. No, sire, they're claiming it's not. They're claiming there's no incumbency placed upon them to check something for its constitutionality prior to enacting it into the legislature, sire. What kind of fools do they take us for? That the government would say, we don't have to check whether something we exact or enact in the legislature is constitutional or not. Sir, it is bold, outlandish, and downright crazy that any government would say that the nation of people have to presume something is lawful and remain in that ignorance as to whether it is or not. That is absolutely harebrained and mindless treason. It is the worst of treasons. It is the highest of treasons, because they're telling people to remain in ignorance as to what the law is, but presume that what they're saying is the law. Excuse me. Yeah, that's pretty much what they're doing, counsel, isn't it? They're telling people to obey things as the law while they're claiming they didn't check. But why would they fail to check? The only reason that they could possibly fail to check whether something's lawful or not before enacting it into the to the legislature is because they know it's not constitutional or lawful, and they want people to comply with it even though it isn't constitutional. Yes, sir, that's what it appears. That they're trying to play ignorant and play dumb and say, we don't know whether it's lawful or not, but you must presume it is. Why would anybody put the Irish people in that position? They wouldn't. It's not normal. That's not sane. That's insanity. Nobody would say, we haven't bothered to check whether what we've legislated is constitutional or not, but you've got to presume it is. So we'll even coin a phrase, it's presumptively constitutional. I'm sorry, it's presumptively constitutional? Why do you have a constitution if it's not going to give you certainty as to what's constitutional or not? Why would you not check something before the constitution if you have the ability to do so prior to enacting it into the legislature? The only reason that anybody would do that is because they know it's not constitutional and they want to enact it into the legislature despite that and require people to obey it. So that to try to appear as though they haven't deliberately or knowingly or willfully gone against the Constitution, they'll claim they never checked. But it's never okay not to check. They're claiming, sire, that it is okay that they don't check something for its constitutionality prior to enacting it into the legislature. They're claiming that that is the case. Well, where does it say that in the Constitution? It doesn't, sire. They've put it into the legislature. So they're now putting things into the legislature council which go against the Constitution? Yes, sire, in increasing number. Really, it's mind-blowing how they've gotten away with this for so long. It really must be an indication of how many Freemasons, wizards and witches are in the government. It must be overrun with them, sire. How, counsel, could it have gotten so bad that such mindless nonsense would find its way into the legislature and not even have gone through the democratic processes to be included there? I don't know, sire. I don't know how it could have gotten so bad. There's only one way, counsel, and that's corruption. It must be the devil and his minions. Well, the only thing we can do is remove the officials. Have them removed, all of which have deliberately and willfully failed to test legislations or bills prior to being enacted in as legislature for its constitutionality or lawfulness according to the Irish Constitution prior to its enactment as legislature. Why would a president of any nation claim that it's okay that he doesn't bother to check something for its lawfulness or constitutionality prior to enacting it into the legislature? Why would any president elect to do that? The only reason that a president would fail to check something for its Irishness is if he didn't care for Irishness. The only reason that the president would fail to check something for its constitutionality is if he didn't care about the Irish Constitution. And therefore he's only pretending to be the President of Ireland. He's actually warring against it and is an infiltrator, a usurper, occupying a seat of government to fail to do their job properly. So today, as king, as an Irish person, who is the equivalent of a king, who acknowledges the written law, who puts it together, and who tells the government to uphold it. We have held them on trial as the Irish government, as our officials who we pay and employ and give any power to. We've held them on trial and found that they're falling short of enacting the Irish Constitution and exacting it and upholding it. They're not even having conversations about the fundamental economic mechanisms and provisions that ensure the common good within the Irish household. They're not even talking about them, but are actually making up terms that aren't even coined in the Irish Constitution. They're not even written into the Irish Constitution. They're making these terms up and having people think about and talk about them instead of what's actually enshrined in the Constitution. And the terms they've made up are living wage and minimum wage. Well, what's living wage? Where does this term come from? It's not in the Irish Constitution. No, sire, our officials just made it up as they went along. You mean they made up minimum wage and living wage and it doesn't even have any foundation in Irish law? Correct, sire. Well, if you were to use the term minimum wage, it would have to be equal to gainful employment. Living wage has nothing to do with Irish law whatsoever. It's not even in there. Even in function, it doesn't even make sense. The only thing it implies is that you won't die, sire, because it's living wage. Whereas gainful employment, sire, says that you would have, enough to pay all your bills and maintain and uphold your household on one wage, and still have some money left over after so doing. Hence the term gainful. Whereas living wage just implies that you won't die. So living wage, council, isn't in the Irish Constitution, but this is the term they're deciding and electing to discuss. Sure, this is a distraction. It's a wild goose chase then. It's a rabbit hole. Yes, sire. Yes, it is. It's a distraction and a decoy. While they fail, sire, to have the discussion about gainful employment, which is an enshrined provision. They don't even talk about gainful employment anymore, sire. What, council? They don't even talk about the provisions they're supposed to put in place by way of the Irish Constitution. Yes, sire, they don't even talk about the Irish Constitution anymore. They only make up their own terms as they go along and talk about them. Well, this is the highest of treasons, council. We'd have to remove these officials. Because these officials aren't even talking about the Irish Constitution. They're already exposed. Whatever ability previously they had to hide their intentions, and now their intentions are made clear. Because they're simply not even discussing the provisions that they're supposed to be implementing. Yes, sire, that is the case. Well, council, they must be removed. Remove them. Well, sire, what will be the punishment? Well, in the 80s we removed the death penalty for treason. Sire, well, council, is it any surprise then that they've increased their crimes if the penalty for treason has been reduced? No, sir, it's no surprise that they've increased their crimes and amendments and enactments against the Irish Constitution post the removal of the death penalty for treason. That's no surprise whatsoever. No, indeed, Council. So, I think that we should apply the worst penalty for treason to these officials. Well, what is it currently, sire? A lifetime in prison. A lifetime in prison, sire. Yes, Council. But, sire, they've tried to hide the fact that they've committed treason. They're claiming that there's no certainty. And when we do bring a test to the High Court, they just abandon the test and fail to complete it, sire. They just abandon the test? You mean this has been brought before the courts of this land? Yes, sire. In effect, there have been legislations that they've enacted unlawfully, brought before the High Court, and the High Court have just abandoned their testing. Mid-case. Mid-case, without excuse or reason? Yes, sire. Even after they found, sire, that these legislatures have brought about injustices perpetrated by the state against the citizen. They found that these legislations that they've enacted without testing before the Constitution have brought about harm on the individual in terms of their rights and liberties, and still continued to fail to test them and abandon them mid-case. Not only mid-case, sire, but in the same case. Which case was this, sire? Or no? 1 second. Which case was this, Council? It was, sire, a case Stephen Tallon versus the DPP. What happened in this case, Council? What happened in this case, sire, was that this man was imprisoned for a month for preaching. They tried to ban him from doing so, and effectively, under threat and duress of imprisonment, apprehension of imprisonment, under an unlawful civil order, prevented the man from speaking for 2 years. In an entire county for a good chunk of that further, maybe 6 months further. And what did the High Court find on this issue, Council? They found, sire, that this man had both injustices perpetrated against him, that his imprisonment was wrongful and that his removal of liberty for 2 years was also wrongful. And this was found by the High Court. The High Court found, Council, that this man was wrongfully imprisoned, wrongfully had his liberties removed for 2 years, and continued to abandon the testing of the legislature which brought these injustices into effect? Yes, sir, in the same court case where it was number 1 on the schedule to test the constitutionality of those legislatures. Well, there's no doubt remaining. There's no ambiguity. It is most certain that this High Court is corrupt and conspiring with those who legislated these things, because now the High Court itself has evidence that these legislatures are bringing into effect injustices perpetrated by the state. Yes, sire, that is the case. It's unambiguous. It's indubitably these legislatures are harmful and therefore unconstitutional. So the only reason that, Council, that anybody would abandon testing the constitutionality of these legislatures is if they knew that by so doing they must be removed before the Irish people. Yes, sire, that is the case, absolutely. There's no other reason why this would occur. There's absolutely no other reason why a court would abandon the testing of the constitutionality of sections which it had found in the same case was bringing into effect injustices perpetrated by the state. Council, I'm surprised at this level of corruption, but it must require the ignorance of the people. So the people have to be educated as to what their rights are and as to how the government are failing to implement them. Yes, sir, that is the case, but these officials should be by law removed and imprisoned for life. Yes, Council, that is the case. So it makes sense that they would run from this as long as they possibly could rather than address it, because to address it and to change it is to show that they conspired against the Constitution of Ireland. Yes, sire, that is the case. Their head is on the block. They have nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Because it's not reasonable by any standard, even in ignorance, for them to continue to fail to test the constitutionality of the sections which they themselves found had brought into effect injustices perpetrated by the state. Well, Council, this is a level of treason that I've never before seen. It must be dealt with, and the facades claiming that something can be presumed constitutional in the absence of testing it for its constitutionality is in and of itself a treason. So even the term presumptively constitutional is a treason perpetrated by whoever legislated it. That's not reasonable for any constitution ever to have such a caveat that would undermine the constitution in any part at any stage by way of legislature that hasn't been tested for its constitutionality. Yes, that is the case, sire. It is indeed the case that anybody who would deliberately fail to test the constitutionality of a legislature prior to enacting it is willfully refusing to uphold the Constitution. Yes, it's unequivocal. It wouldn't be reasonable to accept anything else, Council. Yes, sire. So the Irish government are now a tyrannical dictatorship implemented by Freemasonry, fighting against the constitution of the land, legislating so to do, to create a facade before the Irish people that they're actually doing things by the book when they're not. Yes, that is the case, sire. Court closed.